Good afternoon and welcome back to MIQTV. Now I'm going to be joined this afternoon by Jon Markham, a former student of Quig's who left in 19... and hopefully he'll be along soon. Here he is, in fact. Here he is.
Hello, how are you doing?
Good afternoon, sir. How are
you? Good, thanks. Yeah. Can you hear me all right?
That's a good start. We've got connected. That's great to see you. And thank you for joining us this afternoon. So, quick intro.
Sure.
This is Jon Markham. As I said, a former student of Quig's, left in 1996 after completing, I think this is right, A-levels in maths, physics and chemistry. Have I got that right?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah, and I was actually one of Jon's teachers back in the day. I was a very new teacher back then. And I hadn't heard an awful lot from him over the intervening years until not so long ago, earlier this year. So I was as interested, as I'm sure you will be, to hear what's been happening in the 26 years. Is it really that long since you walked out these doors into the world of, into university and the world of work? So for everybody watching, Jon, would you mind bringing us up to date with your journey from Quig's to today?
Wow,
please.
yeah.
What have you been up to?
26 years and 5 minutes. So, yeah, well, I left in Quig's in 96, which was a fantastic year, the peak of Britpop. You know, we had some awesome stuff going on then. And I did physics at Durham. And I was motivated, I'll probably talk a bit about later, I was actually really motivated to go to Durham because one of my physics teachers at the time was Keith Bamford, who went there in the 1950s. And really, I was really inspired by what he had to say. But yeah, I absolutely loved Durham, and it was a sort of perfect environment for me. We had, met lifelong friends there. It was sort of collegiate, but it was also quite relaxed in many ways. And so I did a 4-year MSci degree there. And in my final year, I did a project to do with plastic electronics, and that was with a doctor, Dr. Samuel, with there, and I just got really engaged with that technology, and that's the end of going to St Andrews to do a PhD with him, and this is around the time of about year 2000, and Holyrood, the Scottish government, had just been formed, and Scotland was really trying to basically carve its own way in the world, and obviously the independence referendum didn't happen for a long time after that, but they were looking to form the cringeworthy Silicon Glen at the time, and so all these young professors were made up. They had really good, very young. They were given loads of budget to set up a new team, and I was sort of part of that as well. So. Brilliant. I'm probably, can you hear it right? Yeah? Is that going good?
Yeah.
Well, I suppose I should add, actually, at school, I was really keen to join the Air Force. I mean, I've missed that bit out, I suppose. So I was sponsored through A-levels and into university by the RAF. And it just turned out, due to medical reasons, I couldn't do kind of what I wanted to do. I couldn't fly, I couldn't do engineering. So I decided to move on, and that's why I decided to do a PhD, because I really loved my physics research, and and the PhD I was offered had a real interface between chemistry, physics, engineering, and just commerce as well, and sort of give a really good introduction to all sorts of different areas of technology and into business. So it seemed like a really good opportunity. So yeah, I did 3 years of PhD at St Andrews, and got quite a lot of papers out of it. Some really interesting research on organic LEDs, which are now in your iPhones and Samsung Galaxies, but 20 years ago were little bottles of fluid that I used to just make things with.
So you were at the cutting edge of that technology when it was beginning. Ultimately became. Oh, that's fantastic. So we've got you to thank. We've got you to thank for that. You and people like you.
In a sense, yeah. I mean, it was PhDs. I don't know. I'm sure many of you students are possibly thinking about doing PhDs as well, and I'm happy. And I absolutely loved it. I really did. But it's a bit like a love affair. It's sort of 1 week you can spend a whole week preparing a series of experiments, and then we used to have this one voltmeter that used to occasionally cut out midway through a series of measurements, and literally you would try not to throw it across the room because you just wasted a whole week, and you'd hate it, and you'd think, oh, and then the next week you'd see something, no matter how small it was, that you were the first person in the world to observe this thing, you know, be it new material, emits a really interesting color or has interesting quantum properties, and that kind of makes it all really worthwhile. And it's sort of a very personal journey as well, as you go sort of navigate your way through to getting papers and discovering things, and then finally the thesis is it's something very personal. It's all your work, you know, and that felt quite special. So that was about 2003, and
so then you're Dr. Jon Markham at this point, yeah?
I am, which is you know, I still get mileage from it. Even now.
Yeah,
you know, people keep, although on the plane you've got to be careful because someone's swallowed something in the throat, you know.
Is there a doctor on the plane? Yeah, I am a doctor.
Exactly.
I might not be any use to you, sure.
I can fix electronics equipment, but not people. Yeah. So
yeah.
So from that point, I did like research. I think it was the career path after that was a bit uncertain for me, because once you get a fellowship or a lectureship, you know, things can be quite well established, but it can take a few years to get to that stage. You know, and the best way to do it, because as you know, as you go through GCSEs and A levels, you narrow down your sort of the subject you're taking. And by the time you do PhD, you are literally at the very point of new work, right?
It's narrow, right, really narrow then, very specific, yeah.
Yeah, which is good, but which is good in its sense because you need to be there to get the positions, but that means there are very few positions available in exactly what you do. And I kind of wanted to be in London, and I wanted to sort of broaden my experience a bit, work with different technologies, and that's when I found out about patents. And a friend's dad, actually, it's a very small profession, as we talked about. There's only about 2,000 in the country.
Wow.
So I found out my friend's dad, who was a patent attorney for many years, and otherwise I'd never have known about it as a career option. And it just seemed to tick all the right boxes. You know, you get to work with really exciting inventions, lots of interesting people across a wide range of technologies, and you know, it's also effectively office-based if that's what you're interested in, and you get to, you know, grow and own your own business ultimately if you become a partner. So
right, and that's how it works. We might return to that in a bit, the sort of how the business side of it works. So you've gone to be a patent attorney. So is the training long for that, or how does that work? So how do you get that field?
Yeah, unlike lawyers, solicitors I'm talking about, you know, solicitors basically you would do either a law degree or a law conversion. So you've done most of your law training before you actually get your first job. And then the lockstep in the big solicitor firms is after your training contracts, which are normally take 2 years. And then you either get kept on as a qualified solicitor or you don't. Now in patents, it's a bit different. You start with you need a science degree to start. So generally physics, chemistry, engineering, biotech, sort of, and then you train on the job. So it's about 5 years, I'd say, to get qualified, give or take. I mean, I think it took me about 3 to get UK qualified and 4 to get European qualified. But you're doing all that studying kind of in your spare time.
Yeah, so that's professional exams to qualify as a patent attorney while you're working.
That's right.
So yeah.
That's
hard work then.
It is certainly, yeah, because it's all very new. You know, you're working with new technology, you're working with the law, which is not intuitive. You have to just learn it. You know, you can't just work it out from first principles like in your area, Mark. So.
Oh yeah, that's what we're doing all day.
Yeah.
So you, I think I'm right in saying you worked at Dyson at one point.
That's right, yeah. So yeah, we might come back to my first job in London. Didn't exactly go to plan, so I moved out to Dyson, who are based out in Wiltshire, a place called Malmesbury, not too far from Swindon.
Yeah,
and that was absolutely brilliant. That was about 2005, and I stayed there for 4 and a bit years, and worked on things like the hand dryer was one of my projects, and and it was a great. The company was basically mostly vacuum cleaners then, but it
Yeah.
was kind of moving into different areas. So we had the fans, so you've seen the fans without the blades in,
Uh-huh.
and things like that. And, not the car. The car was a few years after I'd gone, but yeah,
You missed
it
that
was
one
such a.
for that. Yeah.
Oh no, I was gutted about that actually. But well, it really expanded. I mean, they've got like fighter jets in the cafe now and things like that. That they,
Wow.
they've got a Lightning and a Harrier out in the car park, and yeah,
I imagine
so
it's quite a cool HQ actually.
very good. Yeah, yeah, it is. It's all glass fronted and yeah, really, really very stylish and open plan, and yeah, it's very dynamic and lots of young people really, really, sort of thrusting engineers that want to get forward and
Uh-huh.
always coming up with new ideas, which, yeah.
Brilliant. And then after that,
Hmm. So after that, I decided I wanted to be back in London, and I really wanted to, again, broaden my technology. So I moved back into private practice, and I'm now at a firm called Beck Greener, which is a very small firm by law firm standards. We're about sort of 50, 60 people total. 20 fee earners, as we call them, people that do the billing work, and 11 partners, of which I'm one of them.
mm-hmm.
And it really works well for me because I like working with small technology businesses, trying to startups, and perhaps people that don't necessarily think about IP protection, and working with them almost like a member of their team,
Right.
trying to grow, help them grow their business using IP. And
So they could. IP for those not in the know is
intellectual property. Intellectual property. Yeah. Is it
yeah.
worth me just touching on what that is?
Yes, please. Yeah, because I think that's a fairly major part, I imagine, of what you do or what you support people with.
Yeah, yeah. So although I'm a patent attorney and I'm qualified to do patents, which is one form of IP, there are many forms of intellectual property. So intellectual property is basically the fruits of mental creativity, to describe it.
Right.
So anything you create, be it a written document, will be protected by copyright. A song is protected by copyright. They've seen Ed Sheeran was in the High Court recently over, someone had alleged that he'd copied a song, and
Mm-hmm.
and then there's things like trademarks, which is obviously in branding, you see
Yeah.
everywhere. Logos and company names, that's another form. And then designs protect the way things look, and patents protect how they work. So as a firm, we deal with all of IP. I personally deal with patents and designs, a bit of copyright, and we have trademark attorneys who it's a slightly more specialist role. So trademark attorneys do the trademark stuff. But as a firm, we can, provide everything to clients that they need.
Okay, so I've got a really good idea. I've invented something that I don't think anyone else has thought of before. So do I come along
Well
to
done.
you and say help? What's the sort of process? I mean, obviously there's more to it that I'm simplifying, but if I've got, through the stages and we think, me and my company have got a viable idea that's new, what challenges and what sort of hurdles would we have to go through, and how would you help us?
Okay. Well, the first stage is absolutely critical: is keep it secret. Don't tell
Yes.
anybody, because confidentiality is absolutely critical. Because if you put it out there and talk to friends, family on the internet, your invention is no longer novel, which is a primary category that you need to have to get the patent. So the first thing is, keep it secret, or at least get anyone to sign confidentiality agreements, whatever. Yeah. Maybe you get away with telling your wife. I don't know. It depends. It depends.
But keep it under wraps until later. Yeah.
Until you've spoken to a patent attorney. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
definitely.
so what I'd do is I'd understand your invention, explain how it works, what the key features are, and why you think it's better than what's already out there. And because ultimately patents aren't that cheap to get, and you're looking for something that's going to build you a business, really, because patents have to be justified as a business tool. And so you say, well, why is it better? Why are consumers going to want to buy this product? Well, what's the improvement? Is it a juicer that takes an orange and gives you back an empty husk, and there's no mess, or you know, whatever it is, whatever your improvement is. And then I'd sort of work with you to look and see whether that improvement is actually new and inventive. So it's judged against the whole world. So anything out there in the world, it could be earlier patents, it could be a presentation someone gave once, it could be something on the internet.
Oh, wow.
So we try, yeah, anything is what we call prior art, which is anything else out there which might harm your ability to get a patent. And then, you know, assuming all that looks clear, I then draft a patent application for you, which is a technical document describing how your invention works and how best to protect what we call the concept, the inventive concept. So rather than just the one way it works, I'd be looking and say, well, what's the concept here? What's the new thing? You know, and try and cover all possible variations of that to make sure that we really get a big monopoly for what you're doing. And then once we've done that, we'd file it. So yeah, we intend to go full patent procedure, but that's the general introduction.
So that's I imagine then therefore a very varied and interesting career, because you don't know who's, in a sense, who could walk through the door with what sorts of ideas. I guess is that right? That sounds like it to me.
Oh, very much so. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, so what are some of the areas? What are some of the areas you've worked in then? Just give us a bit of a flavour of, without revealing any secrets, obviously.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's really diverse. So in terms of my current clients, the ones I can talk about, things like there's a lot in AI at the moment. A lot of work, particularly in medical imaging, is very big. So detection of cancer, almost like automated detection of cancer and things like, which are really worthwhile, great technologies. I work in automotive, work with a guy. In fact, I was telling you the other day that with another former old Sav, you know, Ian Hurd, who works for a motorbike company, come up with a revolutionary aerodynamic concept which reduces drag by 70%. And they're looking to build a business effectively around their IP. And I work with satellites, work with semiconductors, really everything, taps and sinks, toilets.
Right.
There's innovation in toilets as well. You can believe it. Yeah.
So it really is. That is a broad variation. What would you? Right. That's brilliant. Thank you for giving us a real sense of what you do. And I, you know, when you first told me about it, I thought it sounded fascinating, and that my opinion hasn't changed. I'm even more engaged and interested to find out about it. I'm sure everyone listening is. What would you say, looking between leaving school and now? What things are you most proud of? What are the sort of, if you're looking back on a, you know, it's not the end of your career, it's quite, you've got a lot done so far. What are the things you're most proud of? What are the highlights looking back over the last 26 years, would you say?
Wow. Yeah, I did say it. Does marrying my wife count as one of those? I think so.
Absolutely. If you're watching.
She might. Yes,
she does watch.
I was going to tune in, actually. Yeah. So, well, obviously, getting my PhD was a huge personal achievement. I mean, career-wise, I'll focus on rather. Yeah. And you know, it felt something very personal. Thought about, you know, and then actually qualifying first time. As I said, I had a slightly tricky introduction into the profession with a few challenges to overcome, and qualifying as a UK chartered patent attorney, you know, and the exams are sort of fearsomely hard, and that's not me trying to boast. It's more that there's a real difference. I mean, lots of kids at Queggs, you know, we're used to doing well and excelling and performing at a high standard and academic thing, and then you know, the same through university, and when people come out with good degrees, and then you do the practical exams in law, and something like a 30% pass rate some years and things like that, and it's very easy to blame yourself and think, you know, it's a natural reaction of, well, you know, what am I missing? But the skill set is kind of different, and when picking up that skill set of being a practical advisor, rather than just having the academic knowledge, it takes a few years to build up.
Sure.
And so passing the exams, because they're known for being quite difficult, was a real personal achievement, and that felt, you know, great to have someone. You're now chartered, and we think you're fine to go off into the world. It's like when you first pass your driving test, and someone lets you loose without having a, you know, a handbrake on their side or whatever. And
possibly a bit nerve-wracking the first few times, like when you first drive, I imagine.
It is.
Or maybe
maybe
not.
Absolutely, for your bosses. Yeah, there's always that sort of surge of early
Yeah,
qualification confidence that you have, right? And
yeah,
but
sure.
you still work closely. It's a gradual thing. You start putting your name on the bottom of letters, and that feels great. It's hard to describe the pleasure that comes from no longer just being a trainee and working for a partner, and
Yeah,
actually signing your own work and making your own decisions, and it's quite empowering. Yeah. Um,
and helping people. That's there's an element of surely of fulfillment and reward from getting people moving forward with their own
mm.
career and their own businesses. There's an enabling factor there that I imagine is quite rewarding. Is it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. That's why I love working with small businesses. And I mean, there's a range of kind of clients, and there's a real spectrum of the kind of work you can do
Hmm.
in patents, be it in-house, be it in private practice, or if you work for a mega corporation, the work is going to be a lot less personal, and it's going to
Yeah,
be more consistent, perhaps. But you're not going to have that element of working with somebody, right from day one and seeing their business grow and being an integral part of their journey, and that is, I find, the most rewarding.
mm.
It's harder work because there's a lot more, it's a lot more involved. I mean, the big clients know exactly what they want from you, and you go away and do it, and then you send a bill. But to me,
Go
exactly, working closely with people and and seeing them grow and develop, and it's just inspiring working with inventors. See the world so differently
on.
from your average person, and
Yeah,
they see challenges and problems to be solved, and then they actually solve them, which
yeah.
so many
That's
people
not
work around. Hmm?
Yeah, not everyone can do that, I guess, or not everyone chooses to do that.
No,
It's
I mean, you look at something
different
like
breed.
I work with surgeons in some of the NHS trusts in London, and for years they're working with the limitations of certain equipment that might be 1950s tech, and then so someone comes along and says, why don't we do this differently? Why don't we actually, tackle these problems head on rather than just trying to learn to adapt to them? Let's
Uh-huh.
solve the problems and make it better for patients. And it's inspiring to work with people like
Yeah, I
that.
can imagine. Wow. And you mentioned mega corporation, but you also mentioned you work for quite a small firm, and I
Mm.
think you also said you work for yourself. So how does that work?
Oh, well, as a
You're a
partner,
partner in
you're self-employed, so
right,
in a business. So yeah, so technically I do, and I have my own practice, as it were, my own clients.
right.
Yeah,
Okay.
so some I share with other partners and things like the bigger clients, but yeah, so I'm the kind of the go-to point, and then we work with trainees and our senior associates as well. But predominantly, I'm kind of the main point of contact for my clients. So
Brilliant. Okay. Um, you mentioned your first job. We won't dwell on that anymore. But what are the challenges? I think we're building towards a kind of one of the things we like to do on the episodes here is to think, look back now to when you were at school and the lads watching, and what sort of things they could take from your experiences,
mm,
your journey, perhaps to think about in their own journey. What are some of the challenges you faced, and how did you overcome them? You mentioned
mm.
obviously, but anything else that springs to mind?
So yeah, let me think. Well, I mean, that was the one example I did talk a bit about. Yeah, was
Mm,
the first one, and that's more like overcoming adversity. I think getting used to. I touched briefly about the examinations. Getting used to accepting failure as sort of part of life's
mm,
journey as well.
interesting.
It doesn't come naturally, particularly at a school like Queg's, where you've got such good education, so high performing individuals, and it is a part of the journey, and it's about trying not to take it all inwardly and blame yourself, and
Mm,
say, I've failed, I've done this. It's more like, how can I learn from that, right? How can I say, well, could I do things differently? It's being sort of almost like self-analytical rather than self-critical. I
yeah,
would say
and
it's
don't let
one.
it defeat you, because as you say, it's learning, it's feedback, it's not failure per se. It's part of the
Mm,
journey. And I think that you're absolutely right. I imagine at school, I remember you as a strong, hardworking student, that you wouldn't have failed very much. You wouldn't have
very
had those
flattering of you.
setbacks very often. Well,
Mm,
but you wouldn't have had those setbacks very often. So it can make it harder to take when it does, and it's how you respond, I guess, that
mm,
defines what happens next, and who you become. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
that's absolutely. And life is full of adversity, and it is often the challenges, the very difficult times in your life can really shape you and make you.
Mm.
And I'm saying, I think I did mention to you one of the things I was guilty of. I mean, I was reasonably good academically, but I wasn't massively sporty, even though I was quite fit. I had useless coordination. So I quite liked hockey, I think, but in rugby I was always short as well. So if I was like a hooker, I'd be dangling in midair with my feet dangling in midair, and so things like that. But so I think I focused more on the academic, and you think actually, like, if I should I be focusing on the things that I find most difficult and trying to
Mm.
understand what it not necessarily sport, but it could be anything, and it's like all about trying to build a real breadth of skill, and that really comes in helpful, really helpful in life, I think.
And you know, that's clearly what's worked for you. We're looking back to school then. Have you got any? You mentioned Keith Bamford already, and him being influential in helping you choose your course. Have you got any other strong memories from school? Any sort of pivotal things or things that you remember well, fondly or otherwise?
Yeah, well, loads of stuff. I had a great time at Craig's. I absolutely loved it. I mean, what I do remember, I think, particularly, I'm going to shout out to you here, Mark, and that's because you're,
Oh,
but, and
I haven't put him up to this, honestly. Thank you. I
you're
haven't heard what you're going
fantastic.
to say yet, but
I'll
okay.
send you the bank details. Um, and Bill Lobel and things was, I think, what I felt as we got to sixth form as well. The way we were taught changed. It became much more collegiate, almost like
Mm,
we're talking. And I've rather than the pupil teacher relationship became much more level and balanced. And I found that really empowering because it helps build your voice and your confidence
mm,
as a, sort of in that journey to being an adult. And that's a lot of what I remember about sixth form, particularly very strongly, that it sort of felt like you're exploring ideas on the level with a teacher and things like with certain concepts in physics. It's more of it's not just like here's an equation. It's like what's the concept? What's the
yeah.
whole point of all of this? And just and having a discussion there. And I found when I went to university that really helped because it sort of you need to be able to then have that confidence to critically analyze things. It's much more self-taught and so, but yeah, I mean, there are loads of them. I don't think at specific times. I mean, I had a good bunch of mates, and the teachers and I had a fantastic time at Craig's.
Well, I think that
But
comes
yeah,
across clearly that you've got fond memories of the school, and
mm.
that's great to hear. So, for pupils of the school and the girls' school and anyone else who's watching, have you got any advice for those people in that position now, looking back from your position further on down the road, as it were? What
Mm.
advice that you've covered quite a few things already. There's a lot of advice already contained, but how could you distill it down to some key things to bear in mind going forward that you've learned over the
Mm.
years?
Okay. Well, I think one thing that's really certainly I look for if we're looking for trainee candidates or in life generally is have a build your skill set, build a really interesting skill set. I mean, for a lot of jobs, so take my profession. It's a very detail orientated profession, and in the early days of your training, you might spend a lot of time in an office doing quite detailed legal arguments and things. But you get to partner level, you need to be a rainmaker and go out and bring in work. So you need those soft skills, the communication skills. You need maybe have some kind of interesting sort of hobbies or side disciplines where you can always learn from different fields. I mean,
Yeah,
what I find, I mean, one of the things you see in innovation is that really good innovations often come from inspiration in some way distant technical field.
yeah,
And it's having that knowledge and that reach and that vision, that wide angle vision to see that. James Dyson's a classic example. I mean, his idea came for the vacuum cleaner, came from a sawmill. It was a centrifugal sawmill separator that you saw on top of a factory one day and thought, I could use that to make a
yeah,
better vacuum cleaner. And it's joining those dots. It's sort of, it's having that, as I say, the wide angle vision both. And so be widely read. And, I think
yeah,
academic route tends to channel you down into a very narrow skill set. By definition, you can't. But maybe do something like philosophy with your physics or something. With hindsight, maybe I thought that
yeah.
would give you a bit of a bit of an edge. And
And I think that's really interesting, because it's possibly, I mean, you're a physicist who became a lawyer. You know, it's possibly the interface between disciplines that perhaps people wouldn't ordinarily think are connected. Is that what, I mean, would you agree with that? That's where some interesting things happen. And if you've got these multiple skill sets or multiple interests, then opportunities will arise.
I mean, you see it in like the Olympics, and I believe in sort of football managers. You know, maybe you don't necessarily recruit another football manager. You get someone from a different sport who can provide something different on motivation or training, or and I think the British Olympic team did in cycling. They were looking at a lot of different, you know, disciplines there, and that, because things have a tendency to become a bit, you know, everyone starts doing the same thing in a field, right? And it takes a disruptor to have an idea from somewhere else to really shake things up. And that's why if you have that knowledge, if you have that interest in all these different areas, that can really, really help you.
Yeah, clearly it's worked for you, and I absolutely agree. Keep learning, keep growing your skill set. And you know, if I want to become a patent attorney, you know, if I like the sound of what I've heard today, and I'm sure some people do, what advice have you got for anyone thinking about finding out more about, or thinking about entering your profession? Obviously, you said there aren't many of you; it's quite select. So how would I get to the front of the queue? What sort of things should I be thinking about?
Well, there's plenty of advice. Our Chartered Institute, CIPA, has had lots of resources and things like that. And do your research on, all the firms are very different. I mean, they don't expect you to know a lot about IP, obviously, at the interview stage. Also, you need to know what the job's about. You know, obviously, I'm happy to, if anyone wants to get in touch with me, I'm very happy to give them some advice or point them in the right direction. Things like that. But I think our Chartered Institute has quite a lot of, and the UK government website, the Patent Office has some, or the Intellectual Property Office, it's called now, has some advice there. But you know, I think key thing, find the right firm for you that's a good fit, and that's you know, where you're going to get the right training with the right kind of minds, because firms are shaped by, you know, every firm has a different character in terms of what they expect from people, the sort of people that work there, and it's the same in any industry, right? But because patent attorneys tend to be quite introverted, it's sort of I think it's the difference is quite pronounced in patents. So yeah.
Oh, well, I wouldn't have classed you as an introvert. You've been really forthcoming today. Thank you. Right, so we normally run about half an hour, so I won't keep you too much long. I'm really grateful for your time. If you're looking back at school, let's say, was there one thing you'd wish you'd heard in an assembly or in a lesson? Is there something that you didn't know then that you've learned subsequently that you think, oh, that would have been useful to know earlier? Ask everyone this question.
Okay, yeah. So I would say there's a couple of points I remember thinking about. Something like, well, in business, one of the key things in business is that if people like you, you know, once you've got past the level of demonstrating your competence, if people like you, they want to work with you. So build relationships, you know, build trust and build friendships with people, and that's kind of the glue that business is all about, right? And you know, people say, oh, you need to have this skill and that skill, and if, you know, you're in programming, you need to know Python, or if you know, but they're your competencies. But people work with you because they enjoy working with you, and you know, you can't neglect the sort of social, what we call the soft skills, but it's really just life skills, isn't it? It's just I would say that it's the most important thing I've probably been told.
And then finally, what's next for you? What does the future hold?
Well, as I told you, we're having a baby very soon. So
congratulations and good luck.
So, yeah, sleepless nights at 44. Well, you know, this is just to be. I'm sure I'll get through it. But... exactly.
I was 45.
Right?
I was 45 when my son was born, so I absolutely get it. And good luck. And it's the best. People said it to me before. It is the best thing that ever happens. And you know, you look forward to it, but until it happens, you don't really understand what they mean. But it's fabulous. So best of luck with that.
Wait.
And career-wise.
I mean, career-wise, it's interesting because once you sort of get to partner level, it's really, you take it in your own direction. As long as your practice is thriving to an extent, people just carry on as they are. I mean, for me, I like to focus on motorsport, and I'm kind of looking to try and pick up clients in, There's loads of, particularly there's like a band around Northampton where a lot of the F1 teams come from, and
Yeah.
where there's some great technology being invented, and people are not necessarily patent savvy. So it's trying to find these businesses and work with them to help them, because there's all sorts of ways patents can help their really help their business. And yeah, so
Good luck
that's
with
my
that.
current. Yeah.
Thank you ever so much. Thank you so much, Jon. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Absolutely.
I'm certain,
it's great to catch up.
I'm certain everybody that's tuned in has enjoyed listening, and the recording will go out on Instagram. Yeah, keep in touch. Good luck with becoming a dad, and keep us posted on how that's going. And we'll stay in touch. And thank you for offering. I know you have previously offering to keep in touch, and to if anyone wants further information, or keep in touch with anyone who's got that career in mind. We've got a patent attorney in the house that we can and if anyone has a really good idea, you know who to go to get it developed and
Exactly.
get it patented. So here's your man.
Actually worked with some schools in London. Yeah. Cheers.
Well, you're very welcome. You're very welcome in Quegs anytime. You're very welcome to come back and visit. Bring your youngster to see us. Is it a girl or a boy? Do you know?
Boy.
You're having a boy. So well, come and bring your young fella to visit us one day, and you'll be very welcome. Thank you so much for joining us and taking time out of your day.
My pleasure, Mark.
Really grateful. All the best, and take care.
Cheers. Bye.